I want to offer from an article I did. It's dated July 2010, but they put that date on it. It was actually submitted in 2011. An article I did on the general topic we're talking about today, in developing conjunctures, a developing crisis, right? But I opened up very early in the article with some statistics to reinforce these points that I'm making. Who benefits? The ruling class. Everything being shaped in a white supremacist fashion, but working people, laboring people, suffering under this. So just very briefly, and these are about 3 years old, but basically what I'm going to show you holds. And the statistics I'm going to show you are all in this article. You can go to it, and if it's a certain statistic from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, you can go to that webpage and get the latest, if you want to pursue it further. So here we go. Basically, the facts of the developing conjuncture, of what we're confronting now. The gap between rich and poor is extreme, and it's widening. Poor and working people are suffering deeply under U.S. capitalism. The ruling class and their media constantly going to tell us, oh, we're doing fine, we got it good, and all this. In my workplace, I did 30-some-odd years in the post office. Every day those foremen would be telling me that. Alan talks about coming up out of the mines, and the boss smiling, as they're coming up out of the mines, saying, oh, you got it good today, right? Yeah, we know better. Very important, comparisons with other advanced capitalist countries show how poorly U.S. workers. This is where sometimes stepping outside a little, you get a little better perspective, and you can challenge these notions of all the illusory benefits of this system, right? And the point I stated earlier, and we will see, there is a definite, unequivocal white supremacist shaping to all these conditions. So, in 2010, the Congressional Budget Office reported that the after-tax income gaps between the richest 1% and the middle and poorest fifth had more than tripled in less than 30 years between 1997 and 1999 and 2007. More than tripled. The concentration at the top of the income scale was the greatest at any time since 1928. That's right before the Great Depression. And when you have this gap, this widening gap, what this leads to, people at the bottom can't buy. And this is when you really go into a deep depression. It's what Marx would call a crisis of overproduction. It's not that they can't produce, they can produce whatever they want, but people can't buy, right? 17% of the workforce, over 25 million unemployed or underemployed. 17%, that's 1 in 6. Social Security, people, and we all probably know people who are doing this, can't find jobs, can't make a living, go on Social Security, anything you can do to try and pay some bills, right? And there's marked increase in in applications for Social Security. Poverty. 40 million Americans, were living in poverty, and this is when, forgive me for not remembering the exact number, but poverty level was like $13,000 or $14,000 a year. And look at this staggering number, 40 million, right? Food stamps, 50% of the children, half of every child in this country, half of the children in this country, at one point in their life are going to be on food stamps. This is the richest country in the world. Just a fraction of what we spend on defense every year could address all these issues, right? Healthcare, over 46 million. We know there's been some adjustment in the last 2 years, but it's still a staggering number. As far as I know, it's up over 40 million and still being shaked out, right? A little bit shaken out. Compared to workers in other advanced capitalist countries, it's important to see how the U.S. workers are faring. I'll get to that in 1 second. The foreclosures had hit a record high. Economic Security Index, 20% of Americans without a financial cushion experienced a 25% or greater loss of household income. Health. The World Health Organization reported that the U.S. health system spends a higher proportion of its product on health care than any country in the world. A higher proportion, not only dollars, absolute, higher, and ranked 37th. All the rip-offs, everybody ripping off on that health industry. Social Security, staggering, this one I find. 50% of wage earners had net compensation less than or equal to $26,261.29. It's $12.63 an hour if you're working full-time. 50% of the workers in this country. Incarceration, as we now know because there's been increased attention, but we have the highest incarceration rate in the world. And this is very important. Of those people who are being incarcerated, 90% are from below the poverty level. That's the direct link between poverty and incarceration. And it's increased 800% in the last 30 years, and there are many people doing important work on this. The international comparisons, crucial, and much more work should be done on this, and we should encourage people to look into this. Compared to 19 other industrialized countries, the Economic Policy Institute does a study. So we have weaker unions, lower minimum wages, less generous social benefits than the other countries. Not than one or two, than all 19, right? We work more hours than those in other countries. We do so without all the statutorily, the in-law paid public holidays, and we are alone amongst this group in not receiving statutorily paid vacation time, right, of all these other countries in the comparison. Most significantly, of the two major measures, and this is what the statisticians use, major measures to measure inequality. One is called the Gini coefficient, and the other is the ratio of the 90th to the 10th percentile. Both measures, the U.S. showed the greatest inequality, right? Greatest inequality. I know I'm preaching a little bit to the choir here, but these are important to know, because one of the arguments you're going to hear people say, as I said, oh, people benefit from this, right? Let's be clear. People are not benefiting. Not working people are not benefiting. Certainly other people are benefiting. Now, to all of these numbers, they're intensified and magnified by the white supremacist shaping. So if we look at unemployment, and we've been through this, at the time I wrote, the black unemployment was reported at 15.6, white was at 8.6, but it's been roughly that 2-to-1 ratio, as I explained, from 1947 up to the present, in some close variant of 2-to-1 ratio. Poverty levels running almost 3-to-1, right? People below that poverty line. 90%, I showed 50% of children overall in the U.S. are going to be on food stamps. 90% of black children in this country will be on food stamps at one point in their life. 90%, the richest country in the world. Equality Index. The Urban League each year puts out a study that usually comes out in January. It's really well worth looking at because they try and quantify a little bit. And however imperfectly it's done, they give you a little glimpse of what's going on. And the numbers haven't changed very much in the last few years. When I did it, their overall equality index was 71.1%, but this was a comparison of how black people were faring compared to, quote, white people, right? 57% in economics, social justice, health. So we see, again, great inequality, and it's in basically all the areas that they analyze. Incarceration rates. Black females over 3.6 times the rate of white females. Black males more than 6 times the rate of white males. Again, Michelle Alexander, no other country in the world imprisons so many of its racial and ethnic minorities as the U.S. And there's work, as we know, being done on this. But again, this cannot be emphasized enough because it ties in with so many of the other issues. And she talks about how America has a set of structured arrangements that locks African Americans into a subordinate political, social, and economic position. The director of the Bureau of Justice Statistics, a fellow named Chaikin, found that 30% of black men ages 20 to 29 were under correctional supervision. And a young black man age 18 had a 28, more than a 1 in 4 chance of spending time in prison during his life, time in prison being defined as 1 year. Staggering numbers, right? Jobless rate in Milwaukee. When I wrote this, this was when the Occupy thing was, had just happened recently, and there was one group on the left saying, boy, this looks like the revolution, right? Well, not quite. Mark Levine of the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee is virtually, it's either one or two, the most segregated city in the country, right? And people have to understand it. And that Scott Walker comes from the lily white suburb right outside, right? So we have to understand how this affects also national politics. But a staggering 53.3% of Metro Milwaukee's working age African American males were not employed. They were either unemployed or for various reasons not even in the labor force. This is the highest jobless rate among working age black males ever recorded in Milwaukee. And the widest racial disparity in jobless rates among 40 of the nation's largest metropolitan areas. And just very briefly, and we'll end with this, Milwaukee is not alone. And these are just some of the cities. But the jobless figure for adult black males, Detroit, Michael, that's where you're from, that area, 59.5%. Cleveland, 52.3%. Buffalo, Chicago, Pittsburgh, and so on. All right. More information can be found on the webpage.